School funding, an educational issue. In recent months, it has been quite common to see on the news, social media, mentions of school funding, especially since Scott Morrison, the recent PM in Australia, came out at a media conference and announced that he the Australian federal government, would be giving $4.6 billion to the Catholic and independent schools. As is his purview as Prime Minister of Australia, the Australian government, federal government, funds the education in Australia, as is their right under the Australian Education Act. They provide the initial funding. It is funneled down through the government treasury, the state and territory treasuries, then their relevant departments of education. Where it goes is then divided once again to the non-government sector and the government sector, and again funneled down further until then eventually it ends up at the schools. However, the problem arises in the recent years, actually since the 1990s, of how much each part gets. Morrison's $4.6 billion has caused some issues. As you can see in the pie chart, government and independent schools, they receive certain and different amounts of funding from the federal government. Independent schools rely heavily on parents and community funding through fees, outside sort of sources like the Commonwealth Bank, the Super Saver accounts, while the government schools are more heavily funded by the government, hence their name, with very little contributions from parents and community, but they also receive other grants from private funding. This, of course, has caused an issue with independent schools where they have had to rely so heavily on parents and communities. As research says, over the past decades, there has been a noticeable decline in student performance, especially in the areas of science and maths and English when compared to other countries that belong to the OECD, or the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, where once we were in the top 10, we have now fallen quite far. Successive governments, both Liberal and Labor, have poured billions of dollars into education to rectify this. However, successive research studies have proven that more money poured in has not changed this at all. That our standings in the OECD countries has still fallen. That is a problem that needs to be addressed. My solution for the future, which I'm going back, the My School website lists the scores of children at different schools from the NAPLAN test, which is the certain years, year 3, year 5, year 7, and year 9. Their scores are published on the website, and they are compared to other schools of the same socioeconomic status. This has caused issues because the socioeconomic status doesn't take into account a lot of other things where children live, the outside funding. Schools have to publish what funding they get, but not what they do with that funding. And that is my solution. That rather we turn it around, that the schools have to prove what they're spending the money on, rather than them saying how much money they get. They have to prove that they spend their money on education, like the teacher improvement. Their teachers are in current sort of education standards. The children are receiving the education that they deserve. And because it is an environment where education has become a business, children have to prove that their education is worth the money. Because as Chester's 2018 says, all children have the right to access similar learning opportunities, irrespective of who their parents are, where they live, and which school they attend, whether they attend a public school or go to a private school in the city or a boarding school or a homeschooled. They deserve a proper education. Thank you for listening to my video. I hope this has informed you at all. And here are my references. Thank you.